We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
We're all familiar with the growing censorship from without, but also there's a fast rising trend of self-censorship whereby regular people are afraid to utter their own thoughts for fear of backlash. It's rampant in the private sector, but becoming even more so in academia. What's the end game, and where does this leave us as a society? Well, we're very fortunate to be joined by constitutional attorney, dapper man about town, legal affairs editor, and host of the excellent Uprising podcast, which I recommend everybody go and listen to, Mr. Scott D. Cosenza, Esquire, to try and figure all this out. Thanks for joining us, Scott.
Cheers, Mark.
So, Scott, FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, they conducted a survey examining, attitudes across academia. What did it find?
A number of things, all sort of disturbing developments on the free speech front, namely that, we might expect, given our regular viewing of news stories as they come across the transom, that the younger professors are much more hostile to notions of free speech, much less likely to support free speech, and much more likely to countenance impositions on free speech than their older colleagues. And of course, the future is where the youth is, and so that's what's so troubling about the findings.
So with these findings, I mean, it seems, as you say, that there's definitely a generational difference there. The younger ones are.
Let me give you one statistic just to kind of throw out there. Over 2/3 of the professors in their 50s and older said that it was never acceptable to shout down, to successfully shout down a speaker, the classic heckler's veto, Mark. But only 1/3 of those under 35 felt the same way. They were willing to grant over 2/3 were willing to say that a heckler's veto was okay. It is the classic denial of free speech on the college campus, and I think it starkly illustrates the problem.
Yeah, that I think that age differential is really important, because obviously you have two reasons. One, the older professors are raised in a different generation where this really wasn't acceptable. You know, the ideas of free speech, especially on a college campus, were thought to be inviolate when many of these people may have gone to college, so even 30 to 40 years ago. But also
longer than that, and many of them came about during the time when the free speech movement was afoot, which was actually about free speech on campus in the face of conservative, largely, but in any case, sort of writ large establishment censorship against alternative speech.
Absolutely, which brings to the second point. So these older professors, they're older. They don't have a career to try and save. So really, the younger ones, they're fearful. And I think that's a very sad place to be. They're fearful about, what am I going to do for the next 40, 50 years if I get cancelled? And it seems that these young professors, they're worried about making some kind of mistake. I think it's 40% are worried about making a mistake that will cost them their career. Now, when they say
that's 40% of the liberals self-identified in the survey, Mark. So you can only imagine, for those who don't identify as liberal, what that number, it must be, closer to 100 than the 0, I would imagine.
I would very much agree with that. So you've got these professors, and they're scared. When they say making a mistake, they don't mean that, I accidentally said that pi to 9 digits instead of 10 digits, and I got the 10th digit wrong. Right. What they're talking about is something that will offend the children. That's what they're talking about when they say a mistake. They mean something that will offend somebody within their class. Or, let's be fair, this can be somebody not even in their class, as we have seen.
A Twitter mob need not occur. Justin Peterson is famously being
Jordan.
What did I say? Justin? I think maybe Justin Trudeau. There was a portmanteau of that. Sorry about that to both gentlemen. No offense intended. Jordan Peterson is famously being either prosecuted or persecuted, as you might say, by I think it's the Ontario College of Psychologists, or if that's not exactly it.
It's the governing body of psychologists.
And for a number of complaints about his clinical psychology practice, and none of the complaints are by a patient of his or by anybody who's even met any patient of his. They're all just some rando person on the internet who decided to complain. And of course, the people who are motivated to act against him in any case now have, some purchase of a ledge that they think they can, they can hoist his own petard on, basically. But
it's an Orwellian 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon now, or 6 steps from Kevin Bacon. I'm never sure how that works.
True for these professors, as you say. Like, they could make a comment at an academic conference by answering a question and not properly denouncing something, or some some perceived pronoun violation that we're, hypersensitive to in these days, anything like that.
Let me get back to the question on this, Scott, because so it's the children that the professors are afraid of, because the children are waiting for an opportunity to pounce on them and make them pay for an unspecified crime or for having a position of authority that they resent. Now,
I appreciate you calling them children editorially, but let's be clear. We're talking about adults in America.
I was talking about their mental capacity. But yes,
that.
They're physically adults. They identify as adults.
By the way, don't make the mistake. It's not about their mental capacity. It's their emotional capacity. That's
absolutely
the trouble
correct
here, Mark.
So they've gone full authoritarian, haven't they? Haven't they become the things which they protest against?
Well, they don't protest against authority. Well, yeah, I guess if they're still using those talking points, but now it's mostly about, hate speech is to be railed upon rather than free speech to be embraced, and this is the natural consequence of it. The sad thing is that, do we see these younger professors maturing into robust defenders of free speech? Without the proper foundation to respect it, you wonder how they're going to, get that seeped into their pores.
Well, here's let me take this idea and make it even more dystopian for you. You have these young professors who will, if they're watching every single word they say in fear, living their careers in fear, they're going to be broken, elderly professors who may have tenure, but who have lost the passion of life and the spirit of critical thinking and fierce thought, which is a tragedy in itself. But then they'll be teaching a generation of people, a new generation of people, to become professors. And imagine what state those are going to be in. I'm always reminded of the idea that you see a young single mother perhaps wandering around with the child, and the child's like 2 years old and it's got pierced ears and whatnot already, and the mother's got the tattoos and the pierced ears. The child at 2 years old has got the pierced ears. What's that child's child going to be like? How far down the rabbit hole does this go?
Face tattoos are the only thing that spring to mind.
I live in the north of England. They're very common.
I would say that what you've laid out is certainly a troubling and dystopian vision of the future. I would say take succor in the notion that our universities will be defunct by then, that the corruption and rot is so through and through, that the value proposition that they offer is so poor that increasingly people are choosing to stay away from them. And given the technological access to...
That doesn't matter if the value proposition is so poor when you have the government seemingly willing to bail you out for the costs along the line.
Even that is a sucker's deal. They act like they're giving these bailouts, and meanwhile, the average cost of a 4-year education, it's like 10%, like something like that is the bailout amount. It's so even the socialism they're not getting right. It's like the imposition of Obamacare. It's a very expensive insurance policy that doesn't cover much. At least the European socialists seem to be able to deliver some services with their
they absolutely do. And as long as you don't mind waiting a year and a half for it, right, you're going to get it just right. Scott DiCosenza, thanks ever so much for talking with us on this particular topic. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Mark.
And that about wraps it up for this week on Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio America Network. My thanks to our guests, Lisa K. Donna, Sarah Cowgill, Jeff Charles, and Scott DiCosenza, and to you at home for taking the time to join us. One final thought to leave you with. Soren Kierkegaard wrote, "People demand freedom of speech as a compensation for the freedom of thought which they seldom use." Now, I have a feeling that if people thought more than they spoke and considered what they had heard more than react with that authoritarian abandon, we might not be in the midst of a war on free speech at all. Just something to consider. Thanks for listening. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. Entertaining, informative, and just plain fun. Watch Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5. Produced by conservatives for conservatives. C5's The Left Free Zone. Hosted by Liberty Nation's Lisa K. Donner. Joined by a raucous, irreverent panel of authors. Deconstructing leftist narratives. Debating the hot topics. And remembering to laugh. Join the official conservative safe
You only
space.
did that to piss Jeff off.
Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5.